MASB sets its legislative priorities every 2 years. The process starts in the fall of an election year as we travel around the state to visit each region to get your input. We hold these meetings with board members and superintendents so that you can brainstorm with us on what you want to see Lansing do or not do. After that, we take all of your ideas from those meetings and we put them into a survey, send them back out to all of our members, and ask you to rank your top 3 priorities in specific issue areas. From there, our Government Relations Committee, which is made up of members from across the state, look at those results and pick the top ones out of that pile. From there, we ended up with 8 priorities this year that our Board of Directors approved at the January meeting. This year's priorities reflect some of the issues that we've been having during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. Things like teacher shortage, mental health, broadband access. They also reflect things that we see every year, things like equitable funding and protecting the school aid fund. So the 8 we have this year include increasing mental health services and professionals in our public schools for both the help of the students and the staff. We have seen some money put forward by the legislature for this, but we know that this is a growing issue as we deal with the pandemic. And expanding access to quality internet, and not just to have broadband in your home, but the device to connect to it. This was an issue that came up at every single meeting we did. True access to good broadband has been so important, and we know that that is not equal across the state. We also know this is not just a state issue, so this is one that we'll be working on at the federal level as well, because it's not just Michigan that has a broadband issue, it is across the country. Reviewing and implementing the recommendations of the School Finance Research Collaborative. This is where we get to equitable funding, where we realize that each student does not cost the same to educate. We've seen some of this reflected in the budgets that have come through over the last few years, but we haven't quite gotten to that full equitable funding model, and that's what we'd like to push for, so that you have a base per pupil, but then each type of student that costs that little bit more, the at-risk, the special ed, the gifted students, that they would get an additional per pupil on top of that. In order to reach equitable funding, we need to protect the school aid fund from state tax policy changes. Each time something is exempted from the sales and use tax or from property taxes, that cuts the revenue streams to our local schools and the school aid fund, thereby having less money to put into our classrooms. We need to make sure that as we talk about state tax policy, that we talk about it in a broad sense on what should be taxed and how it should be taxed, not just piecemeal cuts that affect our revenue streams day to day. We also want to support proper funding for 3rd grade reading and end the mandatory retention. 2021 is going to be the first year that our 3rd graders can be retained. And while we are trying to change that, we think that it should be changed forever. Retention is not a positive thing for 3rd graders. Research shows that as they move on, they have more trouble in school, not just from the reading, but from being retained in 3rd grade. We fully support the efforts to bring our readers to where they need to be in that K-3 space, but we want to make sure that it is properly funded and we are not holding those 3rd graders back. Instead, we should be moving the resources with them. And we support universal preschool for all 4-year-old children. Again, this is your top return on investment. The more children you can get in preschool, the better they do throughout their school career. We'd like to specify in the Constitution that the school aid fund is only for pre-K through 12th grade. This has been a priority of MASB since 2010 when the first loan to the community colleges was made. We now have almost $800 million going out the door to universities and community colleges, money that could be used in our classrooms. And finally, we want to work on implementing state-based programs to help with teacher retention and teacher recruitment. Not just getting more people in our teacher schools and more people certified as teachers, but keeping them in the classroom when they get there. And how can we do that? What sort of incentives can we come up with? And how can we address this on a statewide level? Again, this is not just a state issue, it's a national issue. And maybe it's something that we can work with our national counterparts on as well. So these are our 8 priorities for this legislative session. While there are things that you may think are a priority that are not on this list, it does not mean we're not working on them. We look forward into the next 2 years on what can we work on, what can we accomplish, and what can we move the needle on, and that's what's on this paper. And we thank all of you for engaging in the meetings and in the survey. It is very powerful when we walk into a legislator's office to say these priorities are 100% member driven. They are not just Jen's idea. So thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to working with you together to advance these priorities.